All right. Whoa. Sensitive mic tonight here. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to what is today, March 13th Planning Commission meeting. Welcome, everyone. And Mr. Cox, I think you're getting settled here, so I'll give you just a minute. When you're ready, we'll do attendance. But the time is 7 o'clock exactly, and call this meeting to order. And we will do attendance, please.
So we got Chairman Schenkel,
Present.
Rick Manchester,
Present.
Kyle, can't remember. Zach Bishop, sorry.
Present.
Rick Holmes,
Present.
Mr. Botella,
Present.
John,
Here.
Bill Cox, and then who's here tonight? Mr. Newman. Is Chris the only one?
He is en route.
Okay.
Yes.
Now he's officially done, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep. All right. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is the approval of tonight's agenda. Trust everyone's had time to review that. If there's no additions or other talking points, I'll call for a motion to approve our agenda for this evening.
I make a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
We have a motion from Holmes. Do we have support?
I'll second.
Support by Bishop. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same. Thank you. And tonight, we do have time for citizens' comments. If anyone would like to make a comment, you're welcome to do so. You can step right up to the microphone. Please share your name and your address. And we do have a time limit of 4 minutes. So if anyone would like to share, please do so.
Hello, my name is expert. I'm going to address two different topics. The first one being, seeing how you guys had your hand in the master plan and helping come up with the plan for Vicksburg, I'm very disheartened to learn that even though there was a great handful of comments about a firehouse, there's been no comments from you guys about a firehouse, if there was going to start being a budget, anything along those lines. We get notice that, oh, the new building for the town hall and the police and all these other things, but you guys keep leaving out one of the main concerns for citizens, and it was put on that board multiple times. I went to 2 out of the 3 meetings and saw it on the board no less than 5 times in both meetings, and you guys aren't addressing it. The second thing I'd like to notice is that for zoning, I know it wasn't a couple months ago, the funeral home was here asking about getting the zone changed so that they could expand their businesses, and they came up with counter plans for how to help with the parking so they didn't have to address that issue, stating that they would go to the school and use the school parking. As a neighbor of the funeral home, they have yet to do that in the 5 years, and I'm sure if you FOIA the school, they can give you a response because they asked for that the funeral home ask permission and they would grant it to them to do so. And they're not doing that. So as the future comes and they start sending you guys plans on how to build their business to get more people to come, let's not forget they can't even hold the parking right now. When you guys have your towns up, your events uptown, and they have a funeral on the same day, that street is blocked all the way down. It is a one-way for a whole entire 4 blocks, and it's not safe. And trying to get into my alley to park is nerve-wracking. It's ridiculous. So if you guys can keep that in mind, that they still don't even take care of the parking issue right now with the events that they have. So growing their business and trying to turn that building into a celebration of life to expand their business even more is going to create nothing but problems for parking in the future, even as you guys start hosting bigger days and events downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other citizen comments? Michelle, do we have anybody online other than Mr. Mallory?
There's not an online
We do not.
component.
There's not an online portion
Oh, okay.
to this, yeah,
All right.
to this meeting tonight.
All right, last call for citizen comments. Thank you. All right, as part of your packet that you received, we have the minutes from our February meeting as our next agenda item. So if there are any questions or comments on the minutes from last month, I'll entertain those. Otherwise, we can go for a motion to approve our minutes from February meeting.
Chairman Schenkel, I make a motion that we approve the minutes from said meeting.
Motion by Holmes, support.
Bishop, second.
Bishop, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Thank you. All right, and on to our village manager report. And we have Mr. Mallory tuning in virtually here, so take it over there, Jim.
Okay.
Hold on, we've got a little bit of an echo here in the room. Give us 1 second here. Alex, I don't know if you're able to dial that in for us a little bit more. Yes.
Phase has been initiated. We hope to have that completed at the end of the month. And the other updates will probably be in the Downtown Development Authority when I talk about the request for 23-24 money. But I'll be happy to answer any questions. I do, and I did hear what Rebecca mentioned, and I'll, if you just let her know, I'll give her a call after the meeting and update her on a couple things.
Great. Any comments or questions for village staff? All right. Next item on our list is we have an action item, the Apple Knockers variance requests. We have a presentation from village manager Kyle Mucha, from McKenna, and Andrew Horn, village attorney. Thanks, Kyle.
So before you tonight is an action item, like Mr. Schenkel said. We're asking for a recommendation to the village council regarding the variance request for Apple Knockers. Their property encompasses 220 West Prairie Street, 300 West Prairie Street, and 100 North Mill Street. The applicant himself is Kepco Properties, a subsidiary of Apple, or the owner of Apple Knockers, and they are seeking relief from section 475-116 of the village zoning ordinance, which indicates any building constructed on a lot abutting a lake, pond, stream, or river shall be set back at least 100 feet from the high water line. The applicant has indicated to us their desire to expand their facility at 220 West Prairie Street and do site renovations at 100 North Mill and 300 West Prairie Street. Due to the setback requirements of 100 feet, we find that in essence, the 220 West Prairie and potential 100 North Mill Street would become unbuildable. And what that means is we would not be able to permit any new construction on these sites with that regulation in place. So overall, the summary, like I said, is asking for relief from section 476-116. On page 2 of our report, you'll note that the applicant seeks the following: an 80-foot setback variance from the 100-foot requirement in order to permit construction within 20 feet of the high water mark for the property at 220 West Prairie Street. This is a desire to expand storage and kitchen space. This is the actual Apple Knockers facility itself there, for clarification. B, a 63-foot setback variance from the 100-foot requirement in order to permit construction within 37 feet of the high water mark for the property at 300 West Prairie. Applicant desires to expand the existing structure to permit additional storage for the commercial use associated with 220 West Prairie. And then number 3, a 65-foot setback variance from the 100-foot requirement in order to permit construction within 35 feet of the high water mark for the property at 100 North Mill Street. Applicant desires to expand the building footprint in conjunction with business expansions at 220 West Prairie Street. I think as we all are aware, the site conditions at 220 encompass a commercial use. The property itself is Zone C2 commercial. At 300 West Prairie, it's a former residential dwelling that has been converted to office commercial space. And then 100 North Mills is roughly, what do we have here? Office as well as material storage. Each parcel itself for 220 West Prairie is about 0.24 acres in size. 300 West Prairie is 0.2 acres estimated, and 100 North Mill Street is 0.25 acres. There are standards for variance approval. The village ordinance does not lay out what requires a variance approval, so there are standards throughout the state that we use instead for this. Number one, and I'll brief through these for the Planning Commission and those in attendance as well. Strict compliance with a standard would unreasonably prevent the landowner from using the property for a permitted use or would render conformity necessarily burdensome. We find this to be true due to the size and scope of the existing properties themselves. Strict compliance with the 100-foot setback would necessitate extreme constructions on that western property line, which would almost make it unbuildable itself. Given the size that would be permittable under a building envelope, we find this provision has been met. Further detail in your pack, I'm happy to stop there and any questions. I know there's a lot to go through here on that. No? All right. Number two, the variance will do substantial justice to the applicant as well as other property owners. We find that granting the variance request will not greatly impact neighboring properties. Should the variance request for the three subject properties be approved, substantial justice to the applicant would be granted due to severe limitations the zoning ordinance places on development. Again, this refers back to section 475-116. Number three, a lesser variance than requested will not give substantial relief to the applicant and or consistent with justice to other property owners. We find a lesser variance than requested would not provide substantial relief to the applicant due to the location of the subject buildings in relation to water's edge, meaning that if they were to have a reduced setback from maybe the 80 feet to 85 or so forth, it would not really entail, not permit them to do what they're looking to do on this property. Questions on that one?
Al, I'm just curious, through your research, did you identify when this ordinance was put in place, considering we have over 100 buildings that are infringing upon this ordinance? And I'm just curious.
We're still working with the village attorney on. I have not been able to locate that yet. So that is still a question that I believe the village attorney has been reviewing.
It was pre-1994. It was in place. So it was in place then.
I appreciate that, Chris, but I got to believe it was in 1894 that it was done because of all the buildings that are historic in town. I guess my point in saying that is that how did all these buildings then get built? If that was, I mean, that's my one question, is that if there was an ordinance on the books, how did over 100 buildings in this community get built? Was there a planning commission 30, 40, 50 years ago? There had to be. So again, I'm not belaboring the point here. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Is looking at this, because this will set precedent, right, for future buildings. And so I have no problem with this request, but it's just, again, I'm just trying to get to the bottom of this so that I can make sense in my own head when other people come forward. At least we have a basis for the request. And right now, I don't think we really do.
I don't know if you remember, the most recent one we had was for Lisa Phillips on north of Family Fair. When they did their addition to their house, they requested a variance from the setback of 100 feet on there to build closer to the lake. So we have already approved one of these and dealt with one of these on the books. There's not a lot of buildable area left on there. When Apple Knockers did their expansion in 2019, it was deemed that what they were doing was a remodel and not new construction. And according to the building official at the time, because it was a remodel, he did not consider it new construction, so it didn't meet the requirement for the 100-foot setback because they were adding on to or changing the shape of an existing building. So it was a different permit through their agency. It was a remodel permit as opposed to a new construction permit. And I believe that's probably how a large number of those have proceeded.
Thanks, Chris. Chris, from your perspective, you think that there's been variances that have been written all along for all these folks that have built then?
In the, 15 years that I've been on the planning commission, we have had three variance requests on Sunset, one being Apple Knockers in 2019, one being what is now the Vault, or was the Vault, now Vickers, in 2014 or 2013, and again in 2015, and then the Phillips property, and I want to say that was in 2021. That was just after we started meeting here, just after we started meeting again in person.
I believe Mr. Mallory's got it.
Go ahead.
Like on the Zoom, but the Zoom is also on the phone, so they can hear the phone. No, my phone is not muted, the computer is muted, but the phone is not.
Mr. Schenkel, while we continue to work with our technical challenges, I'm happy to continue on our report.
Go ahead and move forward, Mr. Muccio.
I'll ask a quick question. Do we know what the change was for the zoning on the home in 2021? I'm just curious, so if we're gonna look at this as possible, what are we gonna look at downstream? Because if we're looking at 60, is it 50? Is it gonna be 80? So
The house went to 75 feet.
the house was 75.
But even at 75 feet, that would still render Apple Knocker's lot pretty much non-buildable because the lot is only 110 feet deep at that point.
But do we know how we set these standards? Is this assurance? Is this, I mean, if you grant it, is it gonna be covered under, I mean, is this a state thing that says you can't build that close? That's where
This
I-
is a zoning regulation.
Okay.
Where it comes from, I don't have that information yet.
Because I don't think we can override something if it's a state.
All right. Yes, Jim, you have the floor.
To get through there, but we tasked our village attorney with this history question. I appreciate everyone's conversation in it, but the municipal attorney has both that he can respond to, as well as, I know Mr. Holmes, and we've discussed this before on other issues, but made the comment that this sets a precedent. This does not set a precedent in the Planning Commission. Each issue is taken up independently and individually. And Andrew Horn will explain that as well. Andrew?
Right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, everybody. So we looked into the history of this a little bit. What we came up with this idea that and I say possibly because without going through every ordinance that was created way back when, it was very likely that this was handed down as some form of state requirement or something from the DNR. The reality, though, is, I mean, as you suggested, there's 100 properties that have been developed. The important one here, and just focusing on these properties, especially 220, is this idea that we are not setting a precedent. So every individual has to bring their circumstances. Every individual has to meet these individual requirements, whether it be 4 or more requirements for a variance. If they meet those, it's basically a checklist for us. If the next property owner that comes along and doesn't meet those, they're now guaranteed, or they're more likely not going to get the variance request. I don't want anybody there thinking, hey, listen, if we do this for one person, we're doing it for everybody. We took the facts applied to 220 and well, all three of these properties submitted by KEPCO, and we applied them to the checklist there.
Shouldn't we, though, going forward, shouldn't we find out why the DNR or the Michigan set these standards before we look into doing anybody's variance? Until we understand why they set that.
I mean, the reality is it's not a standard anywhere else. We do a great deal of real estate on the water, not even necessarily Sunset Lake, and they are building within 10 feet of the water. So, and they're not getting exceptions from the state, and they're not getting exceptions from the DNR. The history of this, yeah, I mean, we can go back farther to find out the reality of where it is, and we can get into changing that ordinance to make it more applicable today. But I mean, that's, I don't think that's for today's conversation. We did the basic search on the history of it and came up with, hey, listen, it most likely came from the state or DNR, I mean, years ago. And obviously you all know how much has been developed since that time. It's probably something that needs updating, obviously is, but for the purposes of these properties, it does not set a precedent for anybody else in the village.
So just so I'm clear, we're talking about a zone and it's a commercial zone. I just heard Andrew mention, homes being built. Is it by zone, or is it just in general that you have to have 100-foot setback from water?
This is per parcel.
Right, 475-116 just says setback from lakes, ponds, streams, and rivers. It requires any building constructed on a lot abutting a lake, pond, stream, or river shall be set back at least 100 feet from the high water line. Clearly, that hasn't been getting done. I mean.
Okay, so regardless of zone and regardless of use. Okay, thank you. That was my question.
Yep.
No. So let me back up a little bit too. So again, number one, strict compliance with the standard would unreasonably prevent the landowner from using the property for permitted use, or would render conformity unnecessarily burdensome. Number two, the variance will do substantial justice to the applicant as well as the other property owners. Three, a lesser variance than requested will not give substantial relief to the applicant or be consistent with justice to other property owners. And then number four, where we left off, the problem and resulting need for the variance has not been self-created by the applicant or the applicant's predecessors. We find that the subject parcels and associated site improvements were in existence prior to the applicant taking over the ownership of the parcel. However, the need for the variance, and this kind of ties into the staff findings later on as well, is self-created in the sense that they can still get reasonable use out of that building without a need for the variance. So in our staff findings, we do recommend that the Planning Commission make a positive finding of support of the variance request to the Village Council based on these following findings of facts. Number one, need for the variance is self-created. Again, that is because a variance is not needed to get use out of that existing building. So therefore, with what is being proposed by the applicant, it is a self-created hardship. The need is self-created because they want to expand where it's not permitted. Number two, buildings were constructed prior to the adoption of the zoning ordinance regulations as it pertains to section 475-116. As Mr. Horn said, that was back in the 90s. We could find that. Buildings were constructed prior to that, so it predates the ordinance in that regard. Number three, compliance with the setback requirement will likely result in 220 West Prairie Street and 100 North Mill Street being classified as non-buildable lots. Again, meaning that strict compliance with this would render the property building envelope almost non-existent because of the 100-foot setback from the high water mark.
Can you explain that in another way?
Yes.
I'm not understanding what that means,
So
non-buildable.
Non-buildable, meaning that if you wanted to come in on a normal piece of property, like a residential property, with a building permit, you have setback requirements, front yard, rear yard, side yard. And in those requirements, there's what we call the building envelope of where a structure could be located, meeting all of those needs. So therefore, on this, because of that 100 feet, these parcels are, I don't have it in front of me, 120, 115 feet wide. So 100 feet would shift that envelope to the extreme west of that parcel, giving you 15, 20, a very small margin that you could actually build on. Luckily, our C2 zoning district doesn't have side yard setbacks, so we don't have to worry about that per se. But it would, again, make it so that that building envelope is almost non-existent.
Got it. Thank you.
Sure. Number 4, approval of the variance is not adverse to the interest of the neighboring property owners. We find that this is somewhat self-evident, subject to any additional comments or concerns raised by a public hearing. Number 5, the applicant could construct the building additions further from the water's edge. However, the request seems reasonable given the siting of the existing structures on the property. Again, this goes back into our building envelope conversation. And then number 6, the parcels at 220 West Prairie, 100 North Mills are non-conforming due to their limited width and proximity to the lake or pond, as it directly relates to the regulations outlined in section 475.116 of the village zoning ordinance. Now, further on our report, this is more for the village council and not so much the planning commission, but we do recommend that a condition be subject to the approval that the applicants seek, what do we have here? Building occupancy permits within a certain time frame. Otherwise, the variance approval will become void. Meaning that if village council were to approve it, Mr. Holmes, they have to execute a building occupancy permit within 12 months, 6 months, whatever it happens to be. It could just hang out there for 20 years. So they would need to actually move forward with their progress.
Kyle, one question I have is, I know the expansion plan would move kind of closer to the sidewalk. Is there a setback requirement in this zone from those sidewalks?
There are. We did look at that during the site plan review, and we didn't find that they would encroach on that.
Okay.
The applicant has provided a survey, so those would be reviewed during site plan approval. Again, as I think we mentioned last month, because of the scope of what they're looking to do, it does require site plan review, which would then ultimately come before the planning commission as well. So those would be looked at a further date, but just for the variance itself, you're only being asked to review the 3 setback requests.
Got it.
So I know that's a lot, like Mr. Newman said, planning commission hasn't done a variance request review in some years, so I'm willing to walk through any more of this with Mr. Mallory's blessing on this as well. So.
Do we have any other comments from staff or legal on this matter?
Yeah, I'll jump in. This is Andrew Horn again. I just wanted to kind of follow up there, indicate that we went through the exact same standards from a legal perspective and found the exact same answers they did, or Kyle did, excuse me, regarding this. We didn't find that it was going to deprive any neighbor of any right or ability to develop their property. It doesn't give them a right to, but just speaking to these 3 properties, we looked at it and went, obviously we don't make the decision as to the variance, but within the legal realm, it was absolutely acceptable. I know there was a question when we first saw the survey indicating there was a small corner of a piece of property that we were trying to figure out who title belonged to ensure it wasn't a neighboring property owner. And we looked through deeds and could find no indication that it was a neighboring property owner. The people or the entity that would have the greatest right to this little chunk of property is KEPCO itself, and they're not building over that with this projected project. So it was pretty irrelevant, we found at the end of the day. So.
Yeah, if I can, I'll conclude, Chairman Schenkel. Staff is recommending a motion in support and a vote of support from the Planning Commission to go to the ZBA Monday, March 20th at 7 p.m. This will be taken up by the ZBA at the council meeting.
If there are any further questions or comments for staff or legal, now would be the time. If not, I will entertain a motion for this action item.
This is Member Newman. I would make a motion that we send a recommendation of support to the Zoning Board of Appeals at the Village Council meeting next week, Monday, to approve the variance request from KEPCO on the 3 properties in question.
We have a motion on the floor from Newman. Do we have support for that motion?
This is Member Wortella. I support that motion.
Any further discussion before we vote? Secretary Cox, will you please take roll call?
Chris Newman,
Yes.
Rick Manchester,
No.
Zach Bishop,
Yes.
Mr. Coxon, yes. Chairman Schenkel,
Yes.
Mr. Holmes,
Yes.
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 All right. Thank you for your time, staff and legal. Appreciate that guidance.
Yeah, and Chairman Schenkel, I've talked to Andrew Horn with some commitments he had tonight. He went ahead and zoomed in at my request, but if we can go ahead and excuse him, I know he has matters to attend to, and I appreciate him and appreciated him adjusting on the fly to the phone call then.
Mr. Horn, you are excused. Thank you for attending.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, our next agenda item is our Downtown Development Authority. We do have 2 sections here. The first one is 23-24 fiscal year budget. Mr. Mallory, I'll send this over to you.
No, I appreciate that, and I appreciate the patience of the Planning Commission having a voice come through a phone, and hopefully, I'm not sure if the Zoom's still up on the big screen or not, so we'll just work through that. But on the 23-24 fiscal year, we submitted 2 grants to the Vicksburg Foundation in late February. They were meeting in early March. And it was motivated on Roman numeral 8A. And we, last year, I had 4 different occasions, had events downtown in the summertime, and then went and had the 150th celebration in October and the Christmas celebration and then the iceberg in February. But the response we had received from our downtown merchants was pretty substantial in the positive side of the teeter-totter on what these events are having, as in relates to not only the day of the event, but follow-up traffic with the business and offerings that they provide to the public, not to mention the attendees and just the good public relations and recognition the village of Vicksburg is receiving as well. So what we're looking to do is setting up the 23-24 fiscal budget year tonight is 2 separate standalone that we are, staff is recommending a motion, support, and a roll call vote of approval. The first is that $15,000 will of the Downtown Development Authority revenue that comes to the village of Vicksburg will be used to be able to pay for the events within these Wednesday night activities. What we've set up is on Wednesday nights, we'll go ahead and shut down Prairie and Main Street. And then from 5:15 to 8:30, we'll have a family-oriented event with live music on both Main and Prairie Street. We've secured contracts from 18 different music performers for that to take place. They are music performers outside of the Vicksburg area to draw their followings into our community. We'll also focus around Oswald Park, have kid themes with blow up obstacle courses and bouncy huts. We're partnered with the Vicksburg Cultural Arts Center that they'll each of the Wednesdays, and there'll be 8 out of 9 Wednesdays from June 16th or June 14th through August 16th, taking off the July 4th week. But there'll be cultural arts activities for families and kids. There'll also each week be a designated nonprofit that has an opportunity to have an organized fundraising event within those. So I'll be happy to pause there and answer any questions that board members have, but the specific recommendation from staff is a motion and support and then a roll call vote to utilize $15,000 of 2023-2024 fiscal year budget for what we have going to be marketing the Birthdays of Summer events on Wednesdays. And I'll pause there for questions.
Mr. Mallory, this is Member Newman. Could you repeat the dates and on which these events would take place again?
Yeah, it's starting Wednesday, June 14th, and it will go through August 16th, taking the July 4th week off. July 5th will not be an event. So 14th, 21st, 28th, 12th, 19th, 26th of July, and the 2nd, 9th, and 16th of August.
Thank you for that. My question relates to the dates in June before the 2023-24 fiscal year actually starts. If we're funding those events, shouldn't those be on the 2022-23 budget year? How does that look?
No, that's an excellent question. We submitted a grant with the Vicksburg Foundation, and we'll be able to use for the expenses for those dates. It'll be a matched grant, so in totality, June 14th through the August 16th, we're budgeting about $40,000 when you add the cultural arts component into it. So the money that's spent on those 3 weeks in June will come from foundation money, that grant money.
Thank you.
I didn't see it on. Do you know what the hours of that's going to be?
Yeah, it'll be 5:15 with a hard end at 8:30 at night. We anticipate the streets being back open by 9:30.
Okay, and as part of that,
There'll also be a food truck component too. I didn't mention in the original, but go ahead, Rick.
is part of that funding going to be for support for cleanup and that efforts too, or is that going to be separate?
That might be part of an in-kind through our DPW and policing. It all depends on how the events and the cost for what we want to create for people to come downtown are.
Okay.
Mr. Mallory, my question is around partnership with Chamber of Commerce. Is there any involvement from Chamber on these events? Any financial support? Any sweat equity report component?
There'll be a component, not
excluding anyone, but one of the things we wanted to accomplish is quite often the small businesses in Vicksburg get asked to sponsor multiple events, including multiple events we hold downtown. So that was our goal in utilizing DDA funds, as well as if and the Vicksburg Foundation did vote in support of this matching grant, was that we could pull off the event this year and then utilize that data for 24 and beyond to demonstrate the value of any sponsorship in this program. So no, we're not. It's going to be a village-led series of events on Wednesday. And I know the chamber is looking at returning the iceberg event. And I think we're going to look for some bigger type events like the 150th year celebration, and that will be on Saturdays, that we're looking at those partnerships.
If there are no further questions, we have a action item on the agenda and entertain a motion for that.
This is Member Wortella. I would move to apply $15,000 of DDA revenue to the 2023-2024 fiscal year budget to support Berg Days of Summer.
We have a motion on the floor by Wortello. Do we have support?
This is Member Bishop. I support.
Support by Bishop, and we will do a roll call vote, please. Secretary Cox.
Mr. Newman,
Yes.
Mr. Manchester,
Yes.
Mr. Bishop,
Yes.
yeah. Mr. Schenkel,
Yes.
Mr. Holmes,
Yes.
Mr. Wartella.
Yes.
Yes.
There you are, Mr. Mallory.
Thank you very much. The next item is the second year. Again, we submitted for a matching grant with the Vicksburg Foundation. I'm very thankful for the Vicksburg Foundation's support to continue the property improvement for public benefit program. With your approval to put $18,000 of DDA revenue from the 23-24 fiscal year, it will match the 18 from Foundation, and it should help us. Last year, probably in the construction season, we were a little bit off in rolling out this grant, where with this approval, we can get the grant program in the hands of our building and business owners within the DDA property, and I believe be in a position that the grants could be awarded at the July DDA meeting, thus giving a full 12 months that the property owner or business owner would be able to get the project completed. Be happy to answer any questions. This is the same program that we utilized last year, and I think we all felt it was a significant enhancement from the what was traditionally the facade grant program.
Comments on? Jim, this is Mr. DeVault. Other than the two grants that were completed before last year that we agreed to do, has any of the other grants been started from last year?
Yeah, Mr. Reed has a portion of his completed, but he's going to submit the paperwork once all is done this spring. I do know two others that are planning on completing theirs this spring, and we'll be touching base with them here in mid-April to make sure they know they have until June 1st. But I do know Mr. Reed has completed, I would say, half of what he said he was going to do, and he has just a couple items left that he's going to do in the spring when the weather changes.
The other one was the Apple Knockers one. What were they doing? Were they upgrading their electrical there?
The Apple Knockers had to do with a substantial improvement to the garage behind it. So it has to get the building permit and would come in front of the planning commission to have a retail component, but they wanted to give it a look like the Doors Lee building, is it, in the historic village? And the other one was over at Classic Mortgage and back there, a cement pad and overhang to reference the barbecue business they have.
Thank you. I just wondered how the progress was coming on and stuff in the spring, so.
Yeah.
If there are no further questions or comments for staff, I'll entertain a motion for this budget.
Mr. DeBolt, I make a motion that we approve $18,000 for the Public Benefit Grant Program to be matched by the Vicksburg Foundation for the 23-24 fiscal year.
Thank you, Member DeVault. We have a motion on the table. Do we have support for that motion?
This is Member Newman, I'll support.
Support by Newman, and we will do another roll call vote. Mr. Cox?
Mr. Newman?
Yes.
Mr. Manchester?
Yes.
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 Motion carried. All right. Any other items, Jim, from staff? Any other comments?
No, sir. Be happy to answer any questions. And I don't know if Rebecca's still in the room or not, but I'll give her a call after the meeting's complete.
Great. We will move on to our second to last agenda item, member comments. If any planning commission members would like to share comments, now would be a good time. Go for it.
We'd just like to make a quick comment regarding the last action item that we had. I've been on record as supporting programs that bring together private and public dollars to create opportunities to do much bigger things in the community, and considering the age of our community and the way that this program is going about assisting owners and businesses to invest in those buildings, I think it's one of the neatest things that we can do. And I noticed that Rudy Callan is here, and as someone that's with the foundation, and I wanted to thank Rudy as well as the foundation for not only the tremendous support that you give our community through grants and the things that you do, but also as it relates to the two items that we talked about tonight. So thank you. Sleep better tonight knowing that, sir. Thank you.
Any further member comments?
33,000. Thank you. Gave 5,000 Vicksburg Cultural Arts component. Thank you.
Good. I'll echo Member Holmes's comments. Vicksburg Foundation continues to support events that make Vicksburg an attractive place to visit and an attractive place to invest money and in businesses. So we appreciate the support. Thank you for that shared vision. And I think it's just a great testament to this village's future when we see that continued investment happening both privately and publicly. All right. If there are no further member comments, time is now 7:49, Mr. Lee. I will adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everyone. Have a great evening.